Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Learn for Life Sunbird Education Matters webinar. Uh, just as a way of introduction, I wanted everyone to know that India continues to face one of the worst educational crises in the world. There's over 13 million children of school-going age that are out of school, and the dropout rate in India is about 13%. The statistics show that after 3 years of school, over 25% of children still cannot read, and over 50% cannot do basic arithmetic. The challenge in India is that the spending on education is about 3.5% of GDP, whereas the 2020 national education policy goal was to have 6% of spending of GDP. This is why the work that Sunbird is doing in Northeast India is so vital, because it not only educates the children, but it has uniquely fostered peace in an area that has undergone a lot of conflict over the years. So what I'd like to do, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Colonel Chris Rego, who is a schoolmate of mine from kindergarten through high school. Chris is a graduate of the National Defense Academy and the Indian Military Academy. He served for 3 decades in the Indian Army, Corps of Engineers, and spent about 8 years in the insurgency-affected Northeast Indian states of Mizoram and Manipur, who, along with his wife Myrna, they started sponsoring underprivileged children in Mizoram in 2005, which led them to the starting and the founding of Sunbird Trust, which is a non-denominational, non-religious NGO, a non-government organization in 2014. And the overarching objective was to create integration between the Northeast Indian states and India with their motto of peace through education. Chris has received many, many awards, and also importantly, the critical Ashoka Fellowship for South Asia, which was awarded in Arlington, Virginia, in the U.S. And he's also an author, musician, and has varied interests. So, without further ado, I will introduce you to have Chris give us the story, the journey of peace through education in Northeast India. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Thomas. A very good morning to all who are joining from the US, and a very good evening, late evening, in fact, to those who are joining from India. Thank you, Tom, so much for taking the time off to be here. And you can sit back and enjoy this presentation, because for the better part of it, it's going to be pictures and not too much of the description. So here we go. As Thomas mentioned, Sunbird is an organization working essentially for peace through the medium of education. And through this presentation, we'll tell you the why, the what, and how of what we are doing. So the first thing is, for those who are here may not be familiar when we refer to the northeast of India. So this is a map of India, and you can see what we call the 8 sister states of the northeast, which is in the circle. And the one thing to note immediately is that 99% of the land area is with foreign countries. And there is just a thin neck of about 20 kilometers that is connected to India. And this brings on its own issues of, migration and conflict and sort of different smuggling and things like that. So that is one of the aspects of the Northeast. This is a closer look at the states of the Northeast. Out of the 8, Sunbird is working in 6 of these states. And so here is the problem that is being faced in the northeast of India. Firstly, it is at a limb, a very, compared to the rest of India, very sparsely populated area. The geographical terrain varies drastically from the plains in some parts, thick forest, to the high mountains on the China border where the temperatures drop to below freezing. As would be appreciated in such areas, there is very poor communication in terms of road, and the people do face problems there. There are more than 200 tribes inhabiting this area, which causes them, for the nationalism, their own land, their resources to fight for it. So there has been conflict for decades, in fact. There's a disconnect and alienation from the rest of India. Physically, people look a little different from, you could so, if you want to call it so, the rest of the country or the mainland, as some put it. There is no mainland, everybody's in the land. But the people here are more akin to looking like people from Southeast Asia. Different culture, different language, different way of life. So that emotional integration is yet to happen. Thanks to the remoteness, there's a lack of development in many aspects, especially infrastructure, education, medical, and things like that. And all these put together bring a great degree of instability. So that is the problem that we are trying to address. And just to give you an idea, that as Thomas mentioned, I've spent a good 8 years in the Northeast, and this was during one of my 10 years with the BRTF, which is the Border Roads Task Force. So this was one of the vehicles the driver had reported to me in the morning, going for his normal duty on the road building. And when they reached the site, they were simply blown up by the militants. Very fortunately, nobody was killed in this, but people were badly maimed and hurt. Just to give you an idea, this is one portion of the violence. This is the violence that has happened very recently, starting from the 3rd of May last year, where two of the main communities, that is the Maitais and the Kukis, a very deep conflict started between both of them. Hundreds of villages were impacted, many were burnt, about 200 people were in fact killed. And this conflict is ongoing, though in a quiet way, in a more not as violent as it was when it started. And as I mentioned to you, the disconnect of the people of the northeast of India, who feel at times that do they really belong? They feel that they're discriminated against, there is some sort of racism towards them. So all these are the issues which made me think, that the country is actually putting thousands of troops to sort of control the situation, to handle the conflict or the insurgency, whereas these troops should have been in other places, for instance, the borders of the country. And to keep these troops over here, it is not a sustainable solution to be pointing the gun at your own people. So what is that solution? Because the minute you remove the troops, perhaps the problem would come back again. And then the next aspects of keeping so many hundreds, thousands of troops over there is that there is so much money spent on their salaries, on their equipment, on their training. And if we bring back this peace and these troops could be relocated, perhaps that money could go towards the other very critically needed things such as education, medical, infrastructure, and things like that. So with so many diverse stakeholders, each with their own aspirations, how do you bring all of them together to cooperate on something that will solve the problem and without hesitation? And that brings the solution, which I and my wife, Mana, my wife and myself, we sort of came to this conclusion while we were in Mizoram, where we found that the youth especially were being radicalized because of their lack of access to education and empowerment and consequently jobs. And when that didn't happen, they sort of joined the militants, got into smuggling, these sort of unsavory activities. So education is something that we perceived that all the stakeholders would come together. And of course, that is just one part of it. Through the education, we further wanted to get into peace building, to work through our children for development, livelihood sustainability, and access to many opportunities, as you will see in this presentation. So here is our vision: building peace through education and empowerment of children and youth. And this is mainly in the conflict affected areas. That is our USP, the peace where it is most required. And here is our mission 2030. We aspire to provide at least 100,000 annual scholarship to children who are not able to access school, so as to empower them. We plan to raise 50 institutions, either schools or hostels, in different parts of the Northeast, especially in the remote areas. And most of all, we wanted to positively impact the lives of 500,000 people through our children, through our schools, through our institutions, and through the work that we do. So what is it that Sunbird actually does? So here are the challenges and the solutions. First and foremost, these are very remote areas. So you have hilltops where you will have, say, 20 or 40 huts, and then the next hill, which is about, a few miles away, has got another 40, 50 huts. So the schools cannot be at every location. They are centrally located, and it's very difficult for the children to come down those hills, cross the river, and come up to the school, which takes them an hour or more. So two things. First is the financial barrier. to access to education, which is that the students cannot afford to go to these schools, even if it is a small amount of money. That is because their parents happen to be hunter-gatherers or subsistence farmers. So that financial barrier is overcome by sponsorship. And I managed, as I mentioned, uh, access to the schools is governed by the way that they're distributed among these hills. So building schools and hostels, which is making this education accessible, is one of our priorities. And again, importantly, this disconnect, the mindset change with the rest of India, bringing people back to work together among themselves and with the rest of the community. And as mentioned to you, out of the 8 northeastern states, we are working in 6 of them. These are here, excepting for the 2 southernmost states of Mizoram and Tripura, where we are yet to expand, or we will take a little while to go there. These are the other states that we are working in. So to give you an idea of how we work, so the first thing that we do, which is providing the physical access to education, is these schools that we have built. So as of now, Sunbird has built 13 of these schools, and all the schools have the second name as Friendship. So the first name would be of the local tribe or community. What they choose, it could mean something which means it's close to them. So Pangkriang in the Inpui language means a deep empathy, and Friendship School. So this is the story of one of the schools to give you an idea of how the balance, the 12 other schools being constructed and what is the story with them. So I was called to this village. At this time, I was serving in the Border Roads Organization in Imphal. And the people from a certain Naga village had heard about the work of my wife and I in Mizoram. So the story in Mizoram, like I mentioned, is that we were posted with the Assam Rifles over there. We noticed that there was a great suspicion for people of the rest of India. We came to the conclusion that the reason was that children were not getting access to education, which is why both of us started sponsoring children from our own resources at that time. That's how the whole idea of Sunbird started way back in 2005. So when we came to Manipur, people had heard about the work that we had done over there, and I was invited to visit this Naga village. And it was definitely a risk to my life personally, because this was a village known to have militants. There was a lot of firing and killing on both sides and whatnot. But in a leap of faith, since they invited me, we came over here, and this is the first site that I was shown. So this is little children actually cooking by themselves, because neither can the school afford to have a hostel, nor can the parents afford to put them in any families where they have to pay. So they have these little hostels constructed next to the school, where the children come and cook by themselves. And as the next picture will show you, this is where the parents come, say once a week, cut some firewood for the children, leave a bag of rice, and then perhaps leave them to their own devices. So these kids run into the forest, get some leaves, get some mushrooms, or run down to the river, get some snails or fish, and with a little bit of chili powder, salt, or whatever, they manage. This is the type of food that they were having. And in some cases, I noticed that they were having plain salt and rice. So it really struck me that something needed to be done. So when I reached the village, this was the scene of the school, which you're going to see how this develops over the next few years. In fact, it's now been close to 10 years that we have been developing this school. And so this is the scene that I was typically trying to explain, that from the top of these hills, there'd be villages over here. The children would come down the slopes, cross the river, and come up to this place, which you see in the foreground, where there was a small little school. So the village people said that the thing that they needed the most was a hostel, so that children from all these neighboring villages would come and stay here and perhaps go home at the weekend or even stay in the hostel. So they pleaded for us to make a hostel. Now, I was still a serving officer. We hadn't really started a Sunbird or started gathering funds. So my thing to them was that, hey, listen, I'm not into charity. If you guys are willing to take your share of the burden in terms of building this hostel, we can go forward. So let's make this a partnership and not a charity affair. And they said, sure, sir, we will give you all the wood from our forest. Because here, fortunately, the forests are used by the local communities in quite a scientific way. They're only permitted to harvest the older trees, and there are certain rules and whatnot. So they said, we will give you all the wood, and our village people will go to all our fields. We'll dig out all the rocks for which you can use for the foundation for the stone. We'll put in our best labor in terms of the skilled craftsmen and whatever they can come. But we do not have the money for the cement and the steel and the sheets and whatnot. So at this stage, I decided to call in the Assam Rifles, who already had a good relationship with me personally because of my association with them and also of their knowledge of the type of work that we're doing that was bringing the people closer to them as well as the rest of the country. So I went to the local brigadier and he said, yes, I'm fully aware of this particular village. We've got a post over there and they absolutely need that hostel. So I'm going to help you out and I'm going to give you. He gave me something like 300 of these beautiful blue sheets that you see in this picture. It was very expensive at that time. And the year was like 2012 or 2013. And so, with the help of the stakeholders that the Assam Rifles gave us the sheets, they helped us with the logistics in terms of bringing in the wood, the cement, and the sand, and things like that. And the local folks put in their best foot forward with all their craftsmen. And this beautiful hostel was raised in less than 6 months. So here is a picture of the girls, their first day in the hostel. And here I have to say is that from my mind, I was thinking of one bed per child. Therefore, we'll have a hostel, say 40, 50 children at the most. And instead, I found that, these were children who did not have that many bed sheets or blankets to share. So one bed was used by 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 children. So in the next sequence of pictures, you'll understand how this hostel grew. Let me show you a few. So this was a year after we raised the hostel. When we started, like I mentioned, it was about 40 to 50 children. And this was the next year, 2015. A year forward, all the neighboring villages had come to hear about this. So we got a lot more children. We had reached 150 children. And yes, this looks a lot for this tiny building, but there was such a desperate need that, the beds were pulled together and these children had to be accommodated somehow. And then the chiefs of all the neighboring villages came to me and, they said, sir, this is really doing our children wonders, but you have to admit our children many more children into this school. This is their only chance of, getting a good education. So I said, you must be crazy. Look at the building and look at the number of children. How can we possibly put any more children into these buildings? They said, so you don't understand. If these children don't get to go to school, they're going to join the militants and those, they're going to kill your own colleagues, soldiers. So they emotionally blackmailed. They said, we will help you to, expand the building. And so here is the next scene. We reached 250 children. This is in 2018. And yes, the building was expanded, but as you can imagine, this number of children staying in one building was quite a bit. So fortunately, by now, the word had spread to other organizations, good friends. And we had the Jai Shakti Foundation from Bangalore send their representatives to check out the place. And they said, this is really a need. So they helped us to build this beautiful hostel, which is now used by the girls. So this is the girls' hostel over there. And the blue hostel still remains as it is. Excuse me. So now to tell you, I'd mentioned about that patch of ground. So that's the hostels that were built. And now you'll see the rest of the infrastructure coming up. This is when I just retired for the army. The children could not stand outside in the rain or in the sun. So we built this shed where all of them could come. I'm happy to mention now this building has just been completed with the walls and the flooring and a lot of activities that are done over here. One of our donors from Kerala stepped in and built this beautiful complex, which is a skilling complex, computer center at the bottom, science laboratory in the middle, and music academy at the top. And a few pictures. So the donors said that why should children in your village have less opportunities than children in my state, Kerala, or in Bombay or thing? We need equity. So he insisted on building this beautiful computer lab, which is a 17 or 18 terminal computer laboratory. And these children who had never touched a computer in their lives now had this chance to learn, and they're taking this opportunity very well. And as I mentioned, the top floor of that building is a music academy. We were extremely fortunate that the owner of Fatados, the biggest music company in India, chose to visit us. And he was so touched that he donated an entire music academy. And the children learning music is not about just their recreation or something. It is about giving them a life skill. With the new thing in India of online tuitions, many of these are now, Fatados has agreed to recruit them if they reach a certain standard where they can earn money by taking classes online. And what you saw with the children cooking by themselves. And here is a scene of, again, another donor who stepped in. So we have a beautiful dining hall now where good, almost 300 children can be accommodated. So this is the new scene, again, on that same patch of ground. And going forward, just to give you a very brief glimpse, as I mentioned, we have 13 schools. So just a bird's eye of a few of them that we have constructed. So this school was inaugurated just little over, just exactly, in fact, 2 months ago on the 20th of August. So this is a school in a village called Kachai in the deep eastern part of Manipur towards the Myanmar border. And this picture will give you an idea of the remoteness if you see this. And hidden in all these trees are the small little villages and hamlets where the children stay. In the foreground of this picture, you can see the old school. You can understand from the rusted sheets and bamboo walls what it was and what the children were facing. And of course, you'll see the new buildings which the children now have. You'll be seeing a few pictures from here. So on the top floor, in the top of this, you could see the old buildings. We've retained a portion of this just for posterity, for people to know, yes, this was what it was before. And a glimpse of the buildings that have just been constructed and where the children are now enjoying their classes. And this was the girls' hostel in this place. You could see the gaps in the walls. The temperatures over here even dipped up to freezing in winters. And the cold breeze coming through. The roof was leaking. So with the cold, the rain falling onto the beds, there's no flooring. There was just mud flooring and no beds for that matter. It is just planks of wood. These children were too poor even to have mattresses. So sometimes they would spread cardboard on their beds or sometimes just sleep on the plain planks. So this is the type of situation that was that greeted us, and this is the change that we made. So our friends and our donors from across India stepped up. They contributed the bunk beds, the bed sheets, the blankets. We went on an economy drive. We took off the sheets from the roof and plastered them on the walls and painted them up so as to save money and not rebuild the whole building. Did a cement flooring, so you can see the night and day difference between the old hostel and the new hostel. Thomas, I hope I'm clear. If you can hear me.
Yeah, it's very clear.
Thank you. So going forward, this was the toilet at that school. Can you believe it that these were girls right up to 10th standard standing in a queue to use these toilets when we reached there. And of course, our donors stepped forward, and those are the new toilets of this school. Similarly, in other places, some of the other schools, this is a school in the south of Manipur, which is again affected by the conflict, but is one of our big schools. We have a number of the refugee children, the internally displaced children accommodated in our school and hostel that we built over here. And this is the computers over there. Again, extreme poverty in that place, but we have made every effort to see that these children get all the opportunities that they can. This school is in a very remote part of Assam. As some of my team members have experienced, you're not sure that you will reach this place when you leave from the neighboring town because there is sometimes no road. It's just a direction going through the slush and the forest. So extremely remote place where we were able to build this school, a place called Mualdam in Assam. Incidentally, it's for one of the world's vanishing tribes called the Biate. Their language is protected by the United Nations. So we chose to make a school over there. And now we come to Assam. This is a place called Majuli Island in the middle of the Brahmaputra River, one of the mightiest rivers on earth. So the Majuli Island is surrounded by the Brahmaputra on all sides. And every year, without fail, the river rises. So it's not like if the river rises and the floods come, the children stop their school. No, they don't stop school for even a single day. If they were taking the bus or walking to school, when the water is at this level, they would just walk through, carry their shoes in their bag and walk through and attend classes. And yes, it goes 4 feet, 5 feet higher than this. So what do they do then? So they just take a boat and reach school. Instead of paying for the bus, they pay for the boat and come to school. As you will see in the next couple of pictures, how Sunbird is intervened over here. So this was one of the girls' hostels at one of our partner schools, and they requested us to please help to create a better hostel for these children. And you could see that was just a bamboo structure, and sometimes the beds had a foot of water below them. You can imagine staying in a situation like that. So here is being taken by our teammates we started constructing the new hostel over there. I'd like to mention that in Majuli Island, many of the houses are on stilts, 5 feet high, 6 feet high, because they expect the water to come. And when the water does come, everything moves up. And it's not just the people, it's the pig, the chickens, the ducks, the dog, the cat, everything moves up till the water subsides, which may be a month or 2 months in the making. And so what do they do about the cows? So they have mounds where the village has created where the cows are kept, and people dive under the water, cut the grass, and bring it to feed their cows. So that is the situation. And so this was the place that we were building the hostel in Majuli, and this is the completed hostel. Just to give you of the type of schools and hostels that we are building. Uh, our work was noticed by the government of Arunachal Pradesh, and sometime in 2022, the Speaker of the Assembly of Arunachal Pradesh, Arunachal is the northernmost Indian state abutting the China border, which has seen war, which has seen conflict. So he said that, why are you only working in the southern states of Manipur and Nagaland? And when I mentioned to him that, sir, we are working mainly in the conflict affected areas. So he brought it out to me. We have just, we have gone through a big war. 1962, there was a huge war where a lot of this, the very big battles between India and China. So we went to this place, and this is a MOU being signed between Sunbird and the Speaker of the Arunachal Assembly. So the problem there was that the schools along the border, the villages were being emptied because people were coming inland for the education of their children. The schools were not functioning well, and which is why they were leaving. Now, who are these people? These people are the hunters, the farmers, the shepherds. The border area of most countries is not a thin line with, like you see in the map. It could be 20 kilometers. And it's also called a no man's land because both sides try to push into that area. So these people are very important for the human intelligence in protecting the country. They come back and give information to the army and whatever, that people are moving in, they're setting up a camp and whatever. So the idea was, if you strengthen the border schools, the villages will also stabilize. So a school was handed over to us, which had just 14 children. And we had a young team member go there and run the show. She's at the extreme right of your picture. She's from Chennai in India. And she did such a wonderful job there that the school soon went from 14 to 100 in less than a year because of the facilities provided and, of course, all the infra that came up. And in the rear, you can see my wife on the left and herself in the background. The army, seeing this venture, were very happy. They said that you are our partners in this area. So they jumped in a big way and built these beautiful green buildings, which are now the hostel and the classrooms. And so this is a partnership that has turned out to be the government plus Sunbird Trust plus the army, and we have a corporate partner as well. And seeing this, the government has now handed over an entire district on the Arunachal border. All the government schools, starting with 6 for now, have been handed over to Sunbird to manage. So that is the trust that we've developed even with the government. Another picture from the school. And just to recap a little bit of the history, we were founded in 2014, though Mana and I really began the work in 2005. And we raised the first hostels in 2014. That's the blue one that you saw. Between 2017 and today, this is about the past 7 years, there has been major expansion in which, thanks to our donors, partners, and of course, Thomas Tekatala and the Learn for Life Foundation, we have raised as many as 13 schools. You've just seen 3 or 4 of them in the pictures before this, and as many as 21 hostels. The hostels have been raised in places where we don't need to raise the schools because the schools exist, but the children don't have the facility of the hostels. And our team has now grown to 41 professionals from the field of development, education, social work, all of them living and working in these areas. In 2020, we had a huge partnership. We were deemed as a trustworthy organization and were able to deliver medical supplies and aid to well over 75,000 people. 2022, like I mentioned, we signed the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with the government of Arunachal Pradesh. Very grateful to the help that we've got from Oklahoma, where we have my classmates and a whole lot of doctors who have helped us to raise a school and 3 hostels in Manipur, thanks to, again, to Thomas's Learn for Life Foundation. We signed the MOU now with the government of Arunachal to take over more schools and also start a teacher training academy in Arunachal. And of today, starting with the humble 5-7 children that Mana and I started sponsoring through our own resources in Mizoram way back in 2005, we are now looking at over 10,000 lesser privileged children being sponsored on a daily basis. So here are some of the projects. Again, thankful to Thomas, who was able to get a lot of friends over here to contribute. So here are a few of the schools and hostels that were constructed through the Learn for Life Foundation. So Thomas was, of course, not satisfied. He certainly wanted to check where his money was going. So he took the trip and came all the way to India and visited us in February this year. And I think he would express what his experiences were there. So this is one of the schools. This is a very special school where the insurgency was so bad that there was an army camp. But thanks to the work of Sunbird, things settled down so much that the army vacated and actually handed over their complex to us to form a school. So this is a picture there. This is another place. You can again see the army officer on my left. It had seen a deep conflict. This is a place, a village called Pinjang, a deep complex sort of conflict between two of the resident tribes. People were extremely poor. None of the children could afford to pay, fees, which is why the teachers were even poorly paid. And you can see the classrooms over here. Like I keep saying, these walls are psychological. You can talk in this classroom and you can hear it right to the other end of the building. So at the request of the army and with the kind help of the Learn for Life Foundation, we were able to build a brand new school. And this is the 15th of August, 2022, when we inaugurated this school. And of course, since the army had requested us, I had the privilege of being the person raising the flag on Independence Day, 15th of August. So that's a school. That's a change that you've seen there. These are the little kids in their traditional dress, celebrating the inauguration of the school. And once the school was built, again, the immediate thing that came was we need a hostel here to get more and more children to come to the school. So again, Learn for Life Foundation stepped forward and we got this beautiful hostel. Similarly, another hostel in another remote part in eastern Manipur of Lai village, where we started another hostel. Again here, again at the request of the army. Excuse me, please. So this is the local brigadier who came for the inauguration. He was really thrilled that we could actually do it because people make big promises. And if you look quietly over my shoulder, you'll see a man with a gun. So this is still live danger of conflict, ambushes, and things like that. Okay, so this is typical Sunbird Trust territory. The little children at that school. And we at all our schools, we give a lot of credit to our donors who have helped us to build through Thomas's Learn for Life Foundation. A family from Oklahoma. This is Dr. Vivek Bhaktharam, my classmate from school in Bangalore. His daughter, who is second from left, chose to intern with us. She came from Oklahoma and spent 6 weeks with us. She loved the experience so much that called her whole family, and they spent a while with us at the Pankriang School, which is the first school that I showed you. And so it's not, just making buildings and giving sponsorships is not going to get you anywhere. It's very important to connect with the community. And we do this in multiple ways. This is part of our well thought through strategy. For instance, these are places where many of the youth are radicalized or, could be even dangerous. So the women are the ones who are with us. I call them our insurance policy. They work very closely with us and they tell the husbands, brothers, fathers, or sons that don't dare touch these guys. They are our only hope. So very close with the women, the students group, the village councils in all our villages. And our anchors and ambassadors in these villages are the children themselves. Once they are being sponsored by us, their whole villages become neutralized. And then you will see in pictures ahead how we get the army in also and sort of humanize both sides. So here's the next picture. In pink, these are the army boys of the local army post playing a volleyball match with our girls and boys from the blue hostel, which you saw. And happily, our children beat them at this game. But just to see from a state where they were carrying guns to a stage where they're now playing games. And the army would also come to the village and conduct medical camps for the entire village, help us to make toilets and things like that. So a great part of the normalization process. And when the Assam Rifles and the army realized that, there's so much of good work being done, one very important thing to be mentioned about Sunbird Trust is that it's a totally humanistic organization with no agenda of culture, of politics, of religion, or any extraneous factors like that. It is purely and simply to put the children into school and to bring people together. So, which is why the army too has to be a bit careful joining with organizations that may have some sort of, agenda. And they used to take out our children on camps. This is one where they were taken to Nagaland, enjoyed the given tracksuits, and they really had a good time. Some of them were taken even up to Delhi to see the president and the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So part of the army interaction with us. We believe in working on what unites and not on a particular, track. So our good partners are the Ramakrishna Mission in Imphal. They couldn't reach some of the villages because of various factors. So they came piggyback with us. They brought in their, blankets, even sanitary pads, whatnot, and distributed among our villages. And we in turn have sort of taken their help from time to time. So we have many partners like this. I can mention that Sunbird has helped to bring up, almost 10 different organizations and entities, some of which are big enough for them to help us in ways now. And it does not stop at just the education. It is also about the livelihoods. So salt here is not the salt that you would eat with pepper and salt, not that type of salt. The salt stands for sloping agricultural land technique, which is a very scientifically thought through way of farming, which is much more productive and economical. As some of you might know, there is a very destructive form of farming called shifting cultivation, or in India, we call it jhum cultivation, whereby they burn the forest every 3 years and set down their plants. Once they finish with those 3 years, the soil is leached completely. They simply move away. And what happens is the precious topsoil is washed away. And, it's not at all a productive way. So I won't go into too much detail of this, but this has been I could say, a very good intervention where numerous people are joining in this, which is multi-cropping. It has goats, chickens, pigs, fish, bees, and plants. And people are finding this a beautiful alternative. So this is where we are working with the parents of our children. And importantly, nothing whatsoever was possible without the team. We are a team of 43 as of today. And as I mentioned, people from bringing knowledge from various domains, development, social work, engineering, education, most of all. As many as 14 or 15 of our team members have the background of Teach for India. And again, in keeping with Sunbird Trust ethos, our team members come from various religions, I think 5 or 6 different religions, different parts of the country. And this is a picture of our team taken very recently. As you can make out, most of them are on the younger side. It's not easy to join Sunbird. It takes 3-4 rounds of interviews. We need people with the persistence, the tenacity, the courage, most of all, and of course, the skill to come and join us. So the best of the best, and thanks to them, we reached where we are. This is a picture of, I think in 2017, my wife and I took down 35 children to Bangalore and put them in some of the best colleges. So they finished their engineering, law, BA, BSc, and some of them even finished their post-graduation. And happy to say that from this very picture, 17 of them have returned, interned with us, gone on for further studies, and some of them have actually joined the organization, like the girl sitting at left lowermost. From a sponsored child, she's now a sponsored manager. And many of this team are still working with us. As many as 32, like I said, joined us from various colleges and schools where we had sponsored them. This is a picture of some of the children coming over on Teachers' Day to wish us at our residence. And at the time that Man and I visited, all those who are our alumni who are now working with us, they finished agriculture, engineering, all of them doing extremely well. And importantly, we have been able to, this is a snapshot of just a few of our accomplished Sunbirders. If you look at Dr. Ben, he was one of the first 5 sponsored in Mizoram way back in 2005. He's now perhaps one of the most highly qualified doctors in Northeast India, not just in Mizoram. And he's on our board, and he's also a donor. And in the black is Dollar, one of our Maitai children from Manipur, who got a full-fledged scholarship to the University of Padua in Italy for finishing his master's, and he's already getting very good job offers. We have a number of youth who are doing extremely well in sports, canoeing, boxing, martial arts. The girl in red is now one from Manipur. She's a champion and now going to go to she's already in the nationals, in fact, and she could be a national star like Mary Kom, who many of us know. And on the right are the canoers who are actually the Karnataka team, which is a different state. These boys, sponsored by Sunbird, landed there and they're representing the state. So that's just a snapshot. Coming to the end of the presentation, this is summary of the impact that we have. As you can see, till today, we have given more than 42,000 annual scholarships, right? 10,000 are concurrent. And through COVID, through the conflict in Manipur, various situations, including solar lights, street lights, village tanks, so many other things, more than 275,000 people have benefited. As mentioned to you, we have built 13 schools and 21 hostels. And thanks to Learn for Life, we would hope to add at least 3 or 4 within the next 2 years. And the next is the infrastructure. Sorry, I'll go back. Is such as the water tanks, computer centers, libraries that we have constructed. And these are the proposed cost to give an idea in dollars what it would cost. You'll see some pictures going ahead of these the buildings and the so-called buildings and the critical need for them. We are proposing these 3 hostels in, again, very remote areas. Many of them are very close to the conflict areas where entire villages have been burned to the ground. And there's a desperate need to keep the children in school. I'd like to inform you, just like in all other conflict areas in the world, children from 15 years onwards are being drawn by the militants even forcefully. Families are being asked to surrender, the eldest boy to join the militants. So if they don't get into school and don't get an opportunity, they are very vulnerable to this. So this is what is proposed through Learn for Life Foundation for the next 2 years. This is the existing infrastructure in these places. You can see what it's like, how the children are living, the hostel where they are staying. And these are the sponsorship levels. Thomas, would you like to take on over here, please?
Yeah, Chris, before we get, you could just hit page down through this. I mean, a couple of things that I wanted to say is that the reason that we have to have a hostel adjacent to the schools is because the villages themselves, a single village might have, 100, 150 families. But it's the neighboring villages that tend to be 2.5 hour walk for these kids. So it's impossible for them to come to school every day and return home. That is why you have to have a hostel associated with each of these schools. And, Learn for Life Foundation is working in multiple parts of India. And I visited, this area as well after we started these projects, a few years ago. And I just have to say that the highest impact of every dollar that we have given, the highest impact is being created here by Sunbird. So, for the cost of $50,000 or less, an entire school is constructed. And this is possible because the entire village is committed to constructing the school and maintaining it. So most of the cost really is for equipment and materials and so on. So, 50,000 sponsors a school, page down, 30,000 sponsors, the labs, the computer rooms that you saw earlier. And the cost to, sponsor a classroom is also quite low. But finally, the cost of education for a single child, it's $1,000, covers 10 years worth of education for a child. So that's just an incredible bang for your buck. And so these kids go on to get a proper education, uplift their families and their communities, because these are very, very small villages. Page down. So, of course, for citizens in the US, in addition to what my wife and I are contributing to Learn for Life Foundation, you could contribute as well to any of those levels or any amount, frankly, and you get a full tax deduction. Page down. Yeah, so, I want to open this up to questions. I believe there's 2 or 3 questions that have come in already. So Chitra, maybe you could read the questions and Chris can answer them.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Please do put in your other questions that you may have in the chat box below, and I'll be reading it out for Chris. So we have the first question from Sanya, who would like to know what is the role being played by Sunbird during the ongoing conflict in Manipur?
Yeah, so the one good thing about Sunbird is like with COVID, when everybody went to work from home for our team members was the villages where they were staying. So they stayed out the COVID. They went without oil, without rations. The villagers used to help them. They used to cook even a cup of tea on firewood. And the same thing with the conflict, we suffered because many of our team members had to be relocated because of the violence and protected. They had to go and stay in the refugee camps for a while. But we consider these just little blips and we resumed work immediately. And thanks to being a trustworthy organization, big organizations like the Azim Premji Foundation and other people like that send a lot of relief materials to us. So during the ongoing conflict, one, we have been able to provide a lot of the relief materials on both sides of the conflict. We are accepted, fortunately, and trusted everywhere. Number two, we have physically relocated hundreds of children into schools because their entire villages have literally, let's use the word, evaporated. There's nothing to go back to ever. So these children are being sort of looked after, sponsored by Sunbird, both on the Kuki side and the Meitei side. And beyond this, some children have been put into skill training in Bangalore and allowed to continue with their studies in agriculture and engineering and things like that. So just a few of the things we're doing. And of course, the entire team is on ground, conflict or no conflict.
Yeah, I would just add to this that on my visit from the Imphal airport in Manipur, there were multiple checkposts, to reach these villages. But because, Chris is a former army officer and has worked in the area, there's a great deal of trust and credibility. And, we were able to go through without an issue. So there's a strong partnership between Sunbird and the Indian
local
Army.
population and
Yeah, the Indian Army and the local population. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Sure. The next question we have is from Harsha. She says, why is Sunbird working only in the Northeast when there are so many other parts of the country where children require support to access education?
Well, as I mentioned to you, I was posted in the Northeast for more than 8 years, and I saw the degree of, the conflict, the mistrust, the lack of development, the children not going to school. Sunbird cannot possibly be everything for everyone. So we decided to focus on the Northeast, especially in the remote and conflict-affected areas. And as everybody who's from India would realize that the Northeast is a completely forgotten and marginalized place right since independence. So we have had requests to come to Jammu and Kashmir. We've had requests, to help out in Bihar, but we've had to politely decline because there is so much to be done in our focus area, which is the Northeast. So that is one of the reasons. We would love to go elsewhere, but I think the focus is also very important.
Well, the other thing I would add, Chris, is that, and that's a great question, is that the government of India has been spending massively on infrastructure development, as everyone is aware. However, education lags significantly because the investment by the government is just 3.5% of GDP, whereas their own national education policy goal is to be at 6% in 2020. And out of the 3.5%, the monies tend to go to the largest states in India, the states where the government and the population and their government leaders are in power in New Delhi. Whereas this area, the investment by the country, government in New Delhi, is the lowest. It's far lower than 3.5%. When I visited, I was just overwhelmed by the abject poverty and situation in this place. So the need is absolutely desperate. And, it's not easy to access these areas. One has to have significant trust with the community that Chris and Sunbird have established, over these years. So those are some of the reasons why I think Sunbird has focused on Northeast India.
Yeah, let me give one more point is that, the government is definitely trying its best. In the past 10 years, there have been many improvements, roads, infrastructure, schools, but due to the magnitude of the problem, the remoteness and whatever, it has been difficult. So one of the things that Sunbird does is that we are partnering with the state governments and hopefully with the central government sometime. We consider them as valued partners. This is the work that we could do together. So we're not looking at, fault finding. We're just trying to do a job and work in partnership with the government as well.
Very good. And as Chris said, I think that for all of us who are living in the US or in other areas, there's a great opportunity to visit Northeast India, as Chris likes to say, touch the story, meet with these small communities. And the area itself is just spectacular. Lots of hills and mountains, crisp air, with low clouds. And so hiking in the mornings and such things are fantastic. So we welcome everyone to come out to Northeast India and, touch the story, so to speak. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And, of course, if you have any questions, you could certainly, email Chris or myself at Sunbird or Learn for Life Foundation. And, we can carry on the conversation there.
I can see Dr. Vivek Bhaktharam over here. He has been instrumental in raising a lot of funds through the Oklahoma team. Thanks for joining, Vivek, and sparing your time on a Sunday morning.
Yes, thank you, Vivek. We'll be in touch. Okay, thanks, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this, and we will be in touch with everybody else. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.